Hi there, welcome to Designing for Azure Virtual Machine Solutions lecture. Whether you are building a new or migrating using a lift and shift pattern, your virtual machines might be a choice for you within Azure Cloud. Azure Virtual Machines are the basis of Azure Infrastructure as a Service model, or the hosting model that offers by Microsoft Azure Cloud. And Azure VMs can be used for development or testing or development of your applications within the Azure Cloud, or it could be even extension of your data centers in other way if you could think in that direction. Also, Azure VMs can provide a fast and scalable, flexible way to add more compute power to your enterprise. There are two different scenarios that needs to be considered when it comes to the decision for your virtual machine. So let's say if you're trying to start with building a new one, or maybe you're trying to migrate by using lift and shift. So this is a lift and shift. Also, sometimes we call it as rehosting. So when we look at the build and a new requirement, so it could be because your applications might be demanding in a way to power it on Azure Cloud so that it can give you in an economic sense to run on its Azure virtual machines. And when it comes to the lift and shift or rehosting model, migration strategy that involves moving your data and applications from on-premises location to Azure virtual machines in the cloud. So definitely there are a couple of things that are involved within this process, either building new or rehosting or migrating lift and shift cases, which involves your starting with your virtual network or your virtual name of your VM, deciding for your location of the VM, and determining the size of the virtual machine and the pricing model, storage options, and also the operating system. So all of these, including the monitoring, all of these things will involve into the designing consideration. So let's talk one by one. So beginning with the networking. So the first thing to think about, it's a virtual machine. It's all within its network, right? So spending some time thinking about your network configuration is very important in this case, and you need to understand the network address and subnets aren't trivial to change once you have set up them. So you have to be very careful on that design side, and you also have an option on premises network, and you might need to be carefully consider for the topology that you're trying to create for virtual network for your virtual machines, because that might needs to have some kind of a communication between your on-premises network to Azure Cloud. So you need to think in that direction. These are one of the design factor from the networking side. And coming back to the name, so when it comes to the virtual machine name, one thing people don't put much thought into is the same of the VM. This name defines a manageable Azure resources, and it's also not easy to change later point. Once you create a virtual machine with a virtual machine name, how it looks like, you cannot change a later point because it is the internally created as a Azure resource, right? And you cannot change that. So choosing the names that are meaningful for consistent is very important, and so that you can easily identify what the VM does. For example, if you take it development or dev stands as a development, and then location name maybe US, that represents as the dev, and then US hyphen you could give as a web application, and the VM01, that would makes more sense to identify easily. It's a development and based out in US location, and it works as a application role as a web application, and this is a VM01 might represent the proper way for you, right? That's a VM name that you need to think about when you're trying to designing the Azure virtual machines or when you're planning virtual machine deployment. And also you need to decide the VM location. This is very important part in terms of deciding the location. Let's say Azure has data centers definitely all over the world filled with server centers. These data centers are grouped up into geographic regions, for example, West US or North Europe or South Asia. So such different regions has been splitted, and you could provide redundancy and availability based on the VM locations. So each virtual machine is a region where you want to take the resources like a CPU or storage to be allocated from where. And the regional locations lets you place your virtual machines as close as possible to your users. Let's say your users are sitting in Australia and you're trying to host your virtual machine maybe somewhere in London, then that might not work, because you need to consider the nearest location for your virtual machine to be close as possible as to your users. This location can improve the performance and ensure you meet any legal, even compliance point of view, legally, and also tax requirements. So you need to consider these three things like legal, compliance, and tax requirement, along with the users performance also matters here, right? And two other things to think about: the location choices. First, the location can limit your available options. Each region has a different hardware availability, so you need to think in that direction. The hardware availability, what you're looking, for example, some kind of configurations aren't not available in all the regions. And the second thing is there are price differences between locations also. So that you need to think in that direction. So when it comes to the VM location, you need to think about the legal, compliance, tax requirement, and also availability of that hardware in your location, and also the price difference also you might have to think on those direction. And when it comes to the determining the size of the virtual machine, this is very important. In other terms, when you're trying to create a virtual machine, what is the size, what is the hardware you want to use it. Let's say, is this virtual machine is for general purpose, or maybe it needs a high CPU power or memory ratio, all of that stuff. So there are a few categories that were Microsoft determine the pricing based on your based on the virtual machine family. So the first thing first here, if you look at here, general purpose. So when it comes to the general purpose, general purpose VMs are designed to have a balanced CPU and memory ratio, and it is very much ideal for testing and development for your small to medium database and low to medium web traffic applications. So mostly we use the general purpose application, but this is just for a normal machines. But when it comes to the compute optimized, so compute optimized VMs are designed to have high CPU to memory ratio, and it is suitable for medium traffic web servers and network appliances that are going to talk with this computing. And also it can process a batch processes and application servers considered as compute optimized. And memory optimized or memory hunger applications can be hosted here, and these are designed to have a high memory and the CPU ratio. Earlier here is the computing is CPU to memory high ratio, whereas here memory to CPU high ratio. So meaning memory will be high, CPU is a little lesser compared with the memory, and this is a totally opposite side. And these are good in terms of large cache or large database servers can be hosted on a memory optimized servers, and this is very good for in memory analytics point of view. And storage optimized is more about having a good and great storage flexibility for input and output through output for a great read and write performance based. You could look into the storage optimized. When it comes to the GPU, it's not ideal. So GPU VMs are specialized in a virtual machines target for heavy graphics, redundanting or video editing tools that you want to host it. Then GPU based virtual machines needs to be considered, and these VMs are ideal really for your model training and inferencing with deep learning options. And coming over to the high performance computer, it's not whatnot. It has the fastest and most powerful CPU virtual machines with optional high input output performance, even for your network and your storage, all of that. So it's a highly performance computers that are available for you. So these are the different type of virtual machines or virtual machine families that you have. So once you have the name and the location set from the previous slides, you need to decide this virtual machine sizing, and so that you can choose out of whatever the Azure is offering, like a memory or storage options. So you need to find out what is suitable for you. So the best way to determine is the appropriate VM size to consider type of workload for your VM needs to run it, and then based on that workload you are able to choose the subset of available VM sizes here, and those VMs can be classified based on your workload. So you could take them. Let me share a useful link. When you are in a confused state, you could actually use this link. This will talk about virtual machine selector tool. So we call this as a virtual machine selector tool. You could always go for VM selector or go to arca.ms/VM-selector. So which will open up this link, which is also mentioned within this resource of this lecture. You could simply open that link to find out more information. Let's say you want to host or you want to find VMs by workload type, or find VMs by OS and software, or deployment based on the region. So you could actually start from here. Let's say if I try to start from here, I could select here I'm looking for maybe memory intensive workload, and then which is going to talk about these are the things here within this family. The type of the determining the size. So it's gonna tell you that there are total 270 eligible VMs, and workload type is this. These are the premium hard disk, all of that stuff, and region is yours. So if you just put how many of them you want, maybe you want 6 CPUs, and you are looking maybe CPUs 416 example, whatever the memory. Let's say I want 150 GB of memory, and then it's gonna specs, all of that stuff. Then it's gonna give you more information, like how much disk space you want, all of that. If you put it, it's gonna give you the proper virtual machine type, ECUs, and say region. So these are the machines types are available based on the input that we have given within this virtual machine selector tool. Or virtual machine selector tool will help you to find out what is best virtual machine for you. So this is how you can identify for your applications. Make sure you give a try on that tool, and you can comment how the things going on. The last 2 points would be definitely the storage. So you need to determine what kind of storage needs to have. So Azure can offer you as in terms of the storage account creation and management in the background for you. So when you try to you spin off any of the VM, so that's called the managed disk. So when you create a virtual machine, try to go for managed disk, so that would ensures you to help you for greater performance, so that you can choose what kind of performance tier, for example standard or premium performance you wanted to use it. And also Azure creates and managing the disk. So as you go for or adding the additional disk or scale up your VM up and down, you don't have to worry about the storage being used, because everything is managed in the back end with the managed disk. So that's something not new really, but yes, if you're coming from the last 4-5 years back story, yeah, it's it's old, but now it's the most powerful because it will handle in the backend by creating on its own Azure storage account, and the managed disks will be provision on based on the disk, the operating system. So the last point would be the operating system that you need to consider. So Azure provides various operating system images so that you can install, you can choose your VMs including the several versions of Windows flavor or maybe a Linux flavor operating systems. So Azure bundles the cost of that operating system license price also within the VM price. So if you're looking for more than just one base OS image, you can search for Azure Marketplace, and there are various install images that include not just the OS but popular software tools. For example, there is an image of WordPress or image stack consists of Linux server, Apache web server, or MySQL database and PHP all in one bundle image. It's also available for you. So just look at in the Azure Marketplace. We would talk about the marketplace specific video also. I could show you on that. So instead of setting up configuring each component, you can actually install the marketplace image and get the entire stack all at once. Lastly, if you cannot find suitable OS image, you can create your own disk image and upload, as your disk image can support to be uploaded to your storage account, and then you can create your VM out of that image which you have uploaded. So keep in mind that as you only support 64-bit operating systems, that you need to consider. So important point would be there's a lot to think when you're planning for Azure virtual machines. Take a few minutes to think through what you have learned so far, because that concludes this Azure Virtual Machines lecture. You need to go for the tool based or logic based. For example, here in this flowchart, so whether it's a new build application, do you require full control, then only you're gonna build the virtual machine. Otherwise, it's gonna go for another turn instead of the virtual machine, maybe app service, because you don't need to have a full control. So you need to look it in this direction. For example, left and shift or rehosting, can it be containerized? If it is so, it goes in others flow. But if you don't want to containerize, then there's no choice for you to go for virtual machines. But again, you need to think in that other direction, whether it is a web application or just the API. If not, then this virtual machine. If yes, web application, then it goes to the web app configuration, not the virtual machine. So you need to think in that direction, my friends. This other very important point would be a group of virtual machines might require for your requirement. Let's say there's an application that needs multiple machine instances. So in that situation, you might have to think about a scale sets. So the scale sets are different than the virtual machine. So the same virtual machine will be in a couple of machines will be back, and it will be scaled for a higher performance and higher availability. Finally, we get the higher redundancy. So for that matter, you can look for scale sets, but you need to know what's the major difference between virtual machines and the scale set during the designing. So if you could look at the first point for any kind of changes to the virtual machine, number of configuration, or maybe virtual machine number size, then you need to configure in a virtual machine as a manually, but here it's a fully automatic configuration. Similarly, if you want to look at the load balancing, how it's going to distribute the virtual machine side, we need to manually process and create the required load balancers and application gateways manually. Whereas in a scale sets, it actually integrates, so it knows very well the Azure, and it will automatically scale for your load balancing and application gateway. And also for the high availability and redundancy, when you're creating virtual machines, you must have to create by choosing the proper availability sets and availability zones. But whereas the virtual machine scale sets will be automatically distributed the load across your availability zones and availability sets, so it would be taken care automatically. And also you need to monitor and then the scale the virtual machine. Let's say if the virtual machine is reaching to 80% of the CPU utilization, you might have to scale from there on by adding some more CPU power or maybe memory power manually. That's a complete manual step for a virtual machine. But whereas the scaling, it's not like that. Actually, the virtual machine can automatically scale based on the higher demand to next level of virtual machines automatically, and when the load is decrease, it automatically it can cut down those VMs. So all this is possible with the virtual machine scales, and the virtual machine scales is very important in terms of applications availability or the higher availability purpose. That being said, I'll conclude here and we'll move to the next lecture with the Azure batch solutions. Thank you for watching this.